You need to make sure on Friday when you turn in your responses that you actually have. Oh crud! I pushed cancel on Friday. Make sure that you actually have researched your answers, and they're not just, "Oh, you guys did great." Right? You should, when you research your answers, you should also then use APA formatting. All of you hear that, Garrett? To cite your sources as well. Okay. So, and then for this week, there is going to be, my plan is for there to be a form, multiple choice, and a form for a short answer. And you should read chapter 14. Strongly recommended. All right, let's do it. So just a review of yesterday where we ended, the four different processes for allowing westward expansion to continue was, in summary, let's go back. Federally funded internal improvements didn't really happen, so it was this. Ugh. The idea that independence and land ownership go together, the actual exploration done by Lewis and Clark and others, the treaties that the government had, and then Indian removal. Okay, and we went through Indian removal, and what was Andrew Jackson's response to John Marshall saying that the Cherokee down here had a right to their land? Not a rhetorical question. Look in your notes, and if you don't remember. It was John Marshall. What role did he play in the federal government? Yeah? Chief Justice, right? A midnight appointment by John Adams. He's the last remaining vestige of federalism, of the Federalists in the federal government by this point. And what does Andrew Jackson say to John Marshall? Yeah? He didn't enforce it. He just let the decision kind of stay there awkwardly, right? Okay. Now, just put this there for you so we can kind of get oriented here. As people are moving west, there's going to be an agricultural boom because people are moving west and farming more land than has ever been farmed before. Some reasons for this: depleted soil in the east, overuse of the land. There's not a burgeoning soil science yet that talks about how to fertilize your land properly. After the War of 1812, mostly because of the Napoleonic Wars in Europe, till about 1815, 1816, there's a huge rise in crop prices because there's a huge demand here and overseas. And even after Napoleon is defeated at the Battle of what? Waterloo, thank you. What are you doing? What are you doing? She was like, that was kind of funny to watch from this perspective. Probably not funny to endure, but anyway, Yeah, Battle of Waterloo, he's gone, but they're exhausted. They haven't all their crops are gone. They still need it. So, and then of course there is technology that is helping this whole process. It's not just textiles that were mechanized, but also farming was mechanized. And you can see here, McCormick's reaper, Case's thresher, John Deere's steel plow, and also his there's steel technology also, maybe not by John Deere, but steel technology used to help make windmills as well. And these things actually help increase production. So there's demand, and there is things being invented to give the opportunity to make more. All right. Now, if you were here on that day, 2 years ago, last year, you never. Maybe I'll let you have the first, Emily Buckley. Maybe not. Which one is John Deere steel plow? Anybody? Oops. Okay, I can tell. Okay, actually, I can't tell. I can't tell if you're just quiet like you usually are, refusing to answer my trivia questions, or if you're just not Amanda Clear Creek, Logan Elm, Westfall people, because they would know this because they live on farms. There you go. Right there, that's the steel plow right there. You wouldn't believe how many of my sophomores said I would have called that the thresher. That's the steel plow. That helps take the hardened clay soil in the west and turn it into something, turn it into a breadbasket. Now, the reaper is a device that basically is like a big scissor, and it goes whoosh, and it cuts the stalk down near the bottom, cuts it off, and it falls down. So instead of having this big scythe like the Grim Reaper has, and doing it like that, like the Amish do, this machine, the thresher, or sorry, the reaper would cut the stalks off. It was a machine that did it for you. Which one of these two is the reaper? There you go. That makes this the thresher. What does a thresher do? You could look at the picture, maybe get a sense of it, or you might be able to read some of the notes there on your paper. What's a thresher do? What's that mean? Processing of grain. Here's the dirt. Here is a stalk of wheat. It's cut down by the reaper. It's gathered up. Do you take this whole thing and eat it? No. Are you sure? No, you don't. You don't eat that part. That's the chaff. That's the stalk, right? What do you eat from wheat? No, please tell me you know this. College Credit Plus students, honors, advanced, valedictorians, and all that kind of stuff. This is basic stuff. What part? Bread. Have you heard of bread? Do you know what bread is? What part of this plant do you eat? Yeah. Where's the grain? The top, right? The top, right there. Garrett, I'm taking a pen apart and trying to make it be my wheat stalk, right? That's the part that you eat, right? You can't take them both together. The thresher sifts them, separates them into two separate things. Do you eat the whole stalk? That's what I found. Thank you, Siri. Of corn? No, you eat the little ear of corn, right? If you didn't know that, I'm just trying. Since you're all city slickers, I'm just making sure that we all know this. Okay. Having said that, let's talk about Eli Whitney. When you talk about Eli Whitney, what's the first thing that you need to say? What's the first thing that should come to mind? Yeah. Go ahead. It's right there. What's a cotton gin do? You know that he's associated with the cotton gin, but do you know what the cotton gin does? Yeah. which means cut these seeds out of the cotton, right? You pick this thing of cotton. It's like a, I'm not, cauliflower is not the right word, but it's a big puffy thing, right? And there's seeds inside, and you can't have the seeds when you make clothes because if the seeds get into the clothes, it just makes it all right. Do you know how hard it is to pick the seeds out by hand? I don't either, but I can imagine that would be really, really like labor intensive and hurt your fingers and arthritis and all that, and you just wouldn't get it done very fast. And well, here, let me let the notes tell the story. That's the most time consuming part of cotton. The cotton picking is not, it's the seed removal. So Eli Whitney from Connecticut, a northerner, goes down to a southern plantation, visits it for 10 days, invents the cotton gin in 10 days. And as you can see there in that little box, you just feed the cotton in. This series of combs right here combs the seeds out, and what comes out is something that can be used for making clothing, right? This results in the ability to put more land under cultivation. And so what effect does that have? It increased the need for slaves. You see, the founding fathers, the Jeffersons and the Washingtons and so on, they didn't know what to do with slavery because some of them had slaves themselves. Not Alexander Hamilton, right? But James Madison did. Not John Adams, but James Monroe did. Jefferson, Washington too, right? So they didn't like it, but some of them had them, and even the ones from the north didn't know what to do with them. Like, what do we do with slavery? Do we just like free them all right now? Well, then what happens to them? Have we trained them? Taught them how to read and write? Nope. Have we enabled them to be independent and be able to go out and live on their own? Nope. So what's going to happen to them? If I no longer have to take care of them, then what's going to happen to them? That's going to be a misery and misfortune for a lot of people, right? So, the what do you do with them? So the idea was the thought of the time around the Declaration of Independence time and the Constitution and so on was that the hope is that slavery would just die off because it seems like it's being less and less profitable. And Eli Whitney invents this, and overnight, slavery becomes not a dying institution, but a thriving institution. We need more slaves now. I don't think he meant that to happen. I'm sure he didn't mean that to happen, but that was the unintended result. Prior to this, slavery thought as a dying institution. And now there is going to be southern states that are going to have people move into them as they're moving west. Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Missouri. Hopefully you remember that from the Monroe administration, the Missouri Compromise, because of cotton and the cotton gin. With people moving west and agriculture being a thriving business, that there is a resulting boom in land speculation. Land speculation, again, meaning I buy land for a certain price, I sell it to the next person for a greater price. It's a business. It's buying and selling houses. Try to make money off of it. Now, a lot of people wanting to go out west and make their get rich quick scheme work maybe didn't have a lot of money right now, and so they would take their chance on taking a loan and borrowing and then buying. So not only do you have to make your farm and your crop grow, but you also have to pay back your loan, right? What we're starting to see here is a market economy. And what that means is you are not producing just for yourself and maybe people in your local town. You are producing for the market, the nationwide and even worldwide market. And there are risks associated with this. If you don't have the money to buy a farm, you have to borrow the money. And if you borrow the money, you have to pay it back. If you can't pay it back right away, you got to get a good harvest from your land in order to make a profit. You need to move west, clear the land, plant the crop to get a harvest. If the harvest is bad, or the land takes too long to clear, or international prices of crops fall, then you cannot pay back your loans. And then if you want to keep your farm, you got to get a loan to pay the loan. And you get into this cycle of indebtedness. That is a risk, a lot of series of risks that you'd have to take in order to make this whole thing successful. And it works like a charm if crop prices are high and you have a good yield. And it doesn't if there isn't. In this negative version of dystopian scenario, if banks have no one paying back their loans, the economy is going to crumble, because then what are the banks going to do? They're going to have to close their doors and then people lose their money. So that's the risk. The policy of the federal government was to sell lands. This was one of the hugest money makers besides the tariff, and I think sometimes even made more money than the tariff. And selling Western land actually helps out the Jeffersonians and people that are still of the more Federalist persuasion. This helps out the small farmer because they can improve the average life of the average farmer. That's a Jeffersonian thing, but it also is a business venture, and the Federalists were all about business, and the land speculators are businessmen and women, mostly men. And so that helps them. And so really this is a win-win situation, this whole land speculation thing. And so the Jeffersonians in power, not the Federalists, decide to compromise and sell the land cheap so that their constituents would benefit, but also allow there to be land speculators so that the business side of the country gets going too. And so you can see that this is possibly going to either be really great for our economy or really bad for our economy. Do you know the answer to this? Was it really great for the economy or was it really bad for the economy? You don't know yet. That's fine. The answer is yes. Both, as we'll see. Okay, the bus. For these two who weren't here yesterday and didn't listen to their ed puzzles, now what is the bus? The big thing that you ride to school every day. No, what did you say? Gary, she's saying Bank of United States. Bank BU United States bus. There you go. Increased credit through the bus. This is basically the second bank was supposed to be an entity that can lend money out. All of the federal government's tariff and land sales money and tax money is being put into this bank. What are you going to do with it? Just let it sit there? No, let's use it for the common good. And so this was a Hamilton idea, right, that the Jeffersonians adopted. We're going to loan money out to state banks and to private banks. And the idea, well, is that it will stimulate state banks, give them a more solid foundation. Of course, the states will have to pay back their loans through the federal bus. But the federal bus is basically saying, here's some money for loans, states. Now you state banks, you are now in charge of land sales in your state. And so state banks would give loans to speculators. See how this is a little pyramid being built here? The bus gives up to loan to the states. The states use that money to give loans out to land speculators. Land speculators use that to sell land to people who will probably also have to get a loan. Well, so there's loan after loan after loan coming here. Many debtors at the end of this chain buying land would have to pay back their money with banknotes. Please understand that there is no greenback dollar bills like you might have. Anybody have a dollar bill or something right now in your possession? Can you pull it out just so we can see it? Is it a 50? If it's a 50, don't let me see it because I'll be jealous because I don't carry that kind of. Gosh, oh, there's a 5, right? And you just look at that. See that? See those bills? There was no such thing back then. There was no national currency back then. Congress had the right to make any currency it wanted, but there was no national currency that looked like that. Instead, each bank would have their bank notes. And so if you got a bank note, let's say that you want to buy chickens from me, $50 for my chickens, okay? You go to your bank and say, write me a note, and I will now use that to buy the chicken. So here, Garrett, I'm writing a $50 thing on a little note here. She has now given me, she has paid for it. I give her the chickens, right? Now, what do I do with this? Is this worth anything? Well, not in and of itself, right? But if I burn it, am I ever going to get my money? No. So how do I get my money? I have to take it to that bank, that specific bank, and say, here's this bill of credit. Give me my money. And that's when I can get it, right? And these things were circulating around like crazy. And how much are these worth again? Nothing until they're cashed in, right? Okay. What you really wanted was gold or silver, but people started realizing, oh, we can just trade these banknotes back and forth, left and right, and it'll be all good, right? Do you see how this could be a problem? What if I don't think that your bank is stable enough? Sorry, you got to give me gold or silver. You can't have my chickens because I don't trust your bank. Right? And as they're like passed around from person to person to person, like eventually, like you might start to wonder, is this even real? Was this fabricated? Was this counterfeit? That's the word. Did you know the Secret Service was first made to find counterfeiters? Did you know that? One person knew that. Oh, okay. Cool. My sister in the Secret Service. Have I told you my sister's in the Secret Service? Yes, Mr. Beaver. She's in the Secret Service. She drove around Barron Trump to school every day, to and from school every day. Yep. She had to start off in the counterfeiting part of because the Secret Service still does stuff like that. They also do things with trying to find like child pornography jerks, right? Those weird, creepy people. So, like, if you want to go into law enforcement, there's a lot of places. And if you're a lady, like, your chances of getting hired are better. Just saying. Yeah.
What did you do at college?
Fashion merchandising. Are you making fun of her fashion merchandising? Do you see that? She's like, no, I'm just kidding. No, she wanted to be a designer and in the business, but something 9/11 happened. That's exactly what happened. And she's like, I feel a patriotic call of duty. So she went to the National Guard and volunteered. You know, she's been in the National Guard for Ohio ever since. But then, like, that got her in her circle there. People start talking about the Secret Service. And so she applied and she got in and she met her husband there and he was in the Secret Service too. And she's been all over the place. So, yeah, you don't have to major in law enforcement. You can major in anything. Be in the Secret Service. There you go. Start writing the plot. Start writing the script, and I'll have her be your consultant. Okay. No. This is for you to make money. Okay. So debts of speculators and debts of farmers could be paid in notes, those things that doesn't seem to be worth a lot unless you trust the bank that it's coming from. And of course, what happens is there's so many paper bank notes circulating around that banks start saying, you know what, I don't even know if we have enough money to cover all these notes that we've written for people. And so they start to not be redeemed at face value. Like banks started to say, you know what, I'll give you $25 for that $50 note or something like that, right? because there's just not a lot of trust for it. Not like our dollar bills, which have the backing of the federal government. So it was good for a while. This was a nice little house of cards, right? You can build a house of cards pretty tall, and things were going well, and then crash. Hello, hello, yes, sure. No, that there was that's a class that I've been able to space out very well, and there was nobody within that 6 foot radius of her, and I was making them take notes the whole period, so they had a very boring class. Yep. By contact tracing. This is our first national depression. Now there was a little bit of a down after the Revolutionary War, but this one was, after we have our government established, this is our first national thing. Now the panic was just a panic. That means a short-term, temporary, like oh no, the sky is falling. But then afterwards, there's a depression that follows. The causes of it are the poor practices of the bus and the state banks, allowing there to be all these notes circulating around and not asking for hard gold or silver currency. Then, in the years after Napoleon was defeated, European agriculture came back. And so the prices of crops dropped. So all of a sudden, the great business opportunity that everybody thought farming would be dries up, disappears. Not disappears. Prices fall and you don't get as much as you expected. So then farmers are not getting as much money for their harvest, and they're not able to repay the full amount of their debt. And then when the state banks owed money back to the federal bank, the federal bus, they don't have the money to pay it. And so the bus starts to say, if you we're going to make you demand that you get hard currency as repayment back. But guess who has hard currency? No one, right? And so nationwide credit dries up. Nobody's going to give out any more loans because they know they're not going to get repaid. And all those people who were investing in land speculation are losing their profits, and it becomes a big mess. The effects of this, the farmers don't blame their own state banks. The farmers and the common people blame the bus. It's the bus's fault. It's the national bank's fault. Also, people are starting to see that American farmers are not just farmers. They're businessmen who are engaged in a market that has gone international. When European prices can affect us that much, then we know we are no longer just farmers. I would argue that farming has not been a local thing since this time. Even today, like international grain prices affect everything. So that means that farmers are not just farmers, quote unquote. They're entrepreneurs. They're business people. They're people who are starting a business. Now, look at that last part. If you want to get better profits, you're going to have to start figuring out ways to produce for cheaper and to ship your stuff for cheaper. And so, therefore, there's a demand for a transportation revolution. We'll get to that soon. Let's get to it now. The Panic of 1819, the depression that followed, lasted a few years. It was not a great depression, but it was hard hit for a short period of time. So farmers want to cut costs. They want transportation. The federal government's not doing it because of the theory and the politics behind no federally funded internal improvements. Now, here's the situation. Here's the sitch. Did I use that right? Roads are expensive, as we know today. They're hard to maintain. Did you see that they're finally redoing the sidewalk right there in front of Ted Lewis? Have you ever tried to walk or bike or anything down that sidewalk? Like it's a nightmare. It's an accident waiting to happen. I'm surprised the city hasn't been sued a million times for people turning their ankle. They finally have done that. It takes a lot of money and time to maintain stuff like that, right? So here we go. Steamboats. Necessity is the mother of invention. If we need something, then people are going to be thinking about how to provide that thing, and that's where we get Robert Fulton. Also Robert Livingston, but Robert Fulton is the one who really gets the credit for the first steam-powered boat. The first steam-powered boat was called the Clermont. And instead of having to go with the flow of the river, you can go against the flow of the river with machine power instead of manpower. Or you can go with the flow of the current quicker. And so that means you can get people and goods to market quicker. And that's going to cut down on costs. And of course, as with every mode of transportation that we've ever had, there's also going to be a luxury version of this where you can buy first class kind of stuff. And that's going to help with the rich people as well. Now, this is a chance for me to talk about another Supreme Court case that John Marshall oversaw. I've talked about Marbury versus Madison. I've talked about Worcester versus Georgia. Let's talk about Gibbons versus Ogden. In Gibbons versus Ogden, the state of New York. You know what? I want to draw this. State of New York. Hold your horses. Do you know what New York City looks like? What's it look like? Something like that. Manhattan Island. Up here's Harlem. Harlem's up here. Lower East Side down here. Right? This is the Hudson River. This is New Jersey over here. What's this river? Huh? It's on the east side of Manhattan Island. So it's called the East River. There you go. This is Long Island. Why is it called Long Island? It's a long darn island. It's over 100 miles long. Just let's see if you know the rest of your, like this part right here. What borough of New York is that? It's where AOC is from. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. It's where the New York Yankees are located. Does that help? Nope. The Bronx Bombers. No. Okay, let's do a little bit more trivia. This is the neighborhood that Captain America is from. Brooklyn. This is the neighborhood that Spider-Man's from. Ooh, look at that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Staten Island is down here. Those are the 5 major boroughs of New York City now. Back then, this is just Manhattan Island is New York City. Okay, anyway, Brooklyn Bridge is right there today. Anyway, back then, you had the state of New York City being a part of that. Over here, you have New Jersey. The state of New York said, New York merchants have a monopoly over interstate trade that goes up and down the Hudson River. What's the problem with that? Who's over here? What state? Everything's legal in New Jersey, right? No, like these, can you give a monopoly in your state over an area over there that's not your state? Well, that's what was at stake in the Supreme Court case. And John Marshall, as his almost all of his Supreme Court cases do, strengthen the power of the federal government, saying Congress is the only entity that has the power of interstate, between state commerce. No state can grant a monopoly. The monopoly that New York has given to this particular business has to be busted up. And you know who came in and has made a fortune out of this? Cornelius Vanderbilt. We'll talk about him when we get to the Gilded Age more. And then after that, Cornelius Vanderbilt starts ferrying people around the tip of South America to the other side of the country, to California, for the gold rush. And then, of course, he gets into railroads, etc. This increased the ability of rivals to spread out. And so soon, steamboat navigation just boomed, right? And here is the first, a picture of the first steamboat ever. It was called the Claremont. And you know that it's a steamboat because there is a paddle wheel, and it is powered by coal being shoveled in there. And the coal heats up the engine, and the engine has water, and the hot water makes the pistons go and the paddle go, and so on and so forth. Steamboats inspire other methods of transporting goods, farm goods especially. There are no rivers that go like this. There is no Northwest Passage that goes all the way from one side of the country to another. Did you talk about the Northwest Passage when you were in elementary school? You know, that fictional waterway that people thought, like Christopher Columbus, we could get through America, because America wasn't really where we wanted to go. We wanted to get to the Indies, right? There's none of that, right? The only rivers are the rivers that go basically like this, for the most part. If nature doesn't provide a way, then let's make a way with canals. Remember, Jeffersonians don't want a federal canal system. They don't want a federally funded internal canal improvement. So states had to do it themselves. The Erie Canal was dug by investments from New York City and New York State. The effect of the Erie Canal was so profound, it's not even funny. You wouldn't think that this 300-mile ditch, basically, would revolutionize the rest of the world, of the rest of American history, but it did. And I could argue, it may not be 100%, but I could argue that the Erie Canal is a major cause of the Civil War. How in the world could that be possible, Mr. Beavers? It's just a ditch. Cliffhanger. This is the most boring cliffhanger you've ever heard in your life, but we'll talk about it tomorrow, okay? Is she okay? She's been absent a lot lately. Is she really? Good for her.
It's going to be